in mitigating and adapting to climate change and pushing us forward towards carbon neutrality. Particularly, we're here to talk about a project, a specific project, the Land Fund, which is a project that combines all these three dimensions of finance and carbon sequestration and impact, positive impact in the territories, which I just mentioned. So it's a project that aims to transform the Portuguese landscape. Actually, the Portuguese in the first phase, in the second phase, also the Spanish one. So it's a project with a potential Iberian impact. And so the aim is to convert those areas, those more challenged areas, less developed, abandoned, and transform them into native ecosystems, protecting and enhancing those services that those ecosystems provide, such as carbon sequestration and biodiversity, and also having other positive co-benefits and impacts from a social and economic point of view with the local communities. So the Land Fund is a financial instrument. It's a means to redirect and channel investment, particularly private investment, into these challenges that we all face relating to climate change. And so, well, first I should start by introducing myself. So my name is Angela. I'm co-founder and partner at the Land Fund. My background is legal, so I worked as an environmental lawyer. I specialize in environmental law and climate change and sustainability. I worked as a lawyer for several years. Then had a passage in the European Commission, DG Environment, and worked as an advisor to the former Minister for the Portuguese Minister for the Environment and Climate Action. And since for 1 year and a half now, I'm with the Land Fund project. I also have this other academic hat, so I'm an advisor and a lecturer at Católica Lisbon, of the School of Business and Economics. In this center, it's called the Center for Responsible Business and Leadership, where we focus on sustainability in companies, and particularly we have a very dear project, which is an observatory on how Portuguese companies are progressing and implementing the 2030 agenda, so the Sustainable Development Goals. And now I'm going to introduce Assunção, but I don't dare doing it without looking at my notes, because her CV is amazing. So Assunção holds a PhD. She's a professor at the Nova School of Law, where she lectures, among others, law and sustainability, and oversees the Masters in Law and Economics of the Sea from the Ocean Governance and the Nova Ocean Knowledge Center. Assunção coordinates the environment practice area and the ESG integrated services platform at VDA, and is a former member of the Portuguese Parliament and former Minister of Agriculture, Sea, Environment and Spatial Planning, councilwoman at the Lisbon Municipality, and serves as a chairwoman of the CADIM, a non-profit association dedicated to child development. And besides all this, Assunção and the VDA team worked together with Land in the process that culminated with the authorization granted by the Portuguese Securities Market Regulator, which granted authorization for the Land Fund to exist. And it was actually the first real estate Article 9 sustainable and dark green fund. We'll explain further ahead what this all means. And actually VDA was shortlisted very recently by the Financial Times Most Innovative Lawyers, I think that's the name, for their work in developing the Land Fund. So Assunção, for this to become a dialogue and not a monologue. So Assunção, the IPCC has concluded in its reports that besides reduction, neutrality can only be reached with the contribution of carbon sequestration and removal. And so the European climate law has set ambitious reduction targets. The Portuguese climate law has even set a specific target for removals from the land use and forest sectors. And what I would like to ask you is, what do you think is the role of finance in climate change mitigation and adaptation, and why is the Land Fund so innovative?
Thank you, Angela, for the invitation to be here and share some thoughts and views on this new tool to help us reach our climate goals. As you said, the IPCC is very clear. We need to reduce emissions, and that is pretty much addressed in legislation, both overarching and sectorial legislation. But at the same time, we will not achieve the climate neutrality goal unless we are able to remove the existing emissions that are already there. Actually, if we stopped our activity as human beings, and we saw a little bit of that at the pandemic, but even if we were able to do that, which is not obviously something that we could do, even so, we still had a lot of emissions to remove and make sure that we can do that effectively. How can we do that? Of course, there are different technologies, there are mechanical solutions, but what Land Fund does is look at nature and look at land, look at the use that we have now and the use that we might have in the coming future, and develop nature-based solutions. And this is something really aligned with the Paris Agreement and Article 2. Article 2 is quite clear when states the need to make the money flow to where we need it, and we need it in many areas, and definitely we need it to remove and sequester carbon. What I found so interesting about the carbon voluntary carbon markets and this solution, and we'll go a little bit deep on that, of the Land Fund, is that it combines a different and very sophisticated financial tool, which is a real estate fund, but a real estate fund dedicated to recovery of land, not only for carbon, but also for biodiversity. I don't want to spend a little bit on that. And the good thing is that even before this legislation, both Portuguese and European legislation was settled, we're still in the process. So the Portuguese decree law dedicated to the voluntary carbon markets was approved last week, was it? But we're still waiting for promulgation and publication and entry into force. And the European regulation on the certification of carbon removals is still pending approval, still ongoing. But our Securities Market Commission, our CMVM, was able to approve this solution, which actually was really challenging and led us to a lot of conversation, a lot of thinking, a lot of technical issues. But at the end, we have this Article 9, SCFDR Article 9, but also with this carbon sequestration method. I don't know if you want to explain a little bit.
Just to for the benefit of who doesn't know exactly what an Article 9 dark green fund means, is that this regulation that Assunção just mentioned, CFDR, an European regulation that actually distinguishes the different types of financial instruments, and so from an instrument that doesn't focus whatsoever in sustainability, and there's this second type, which is, for example, a fund that marginally also has a positive impact in sustainability. And then there's this so-called Article 9 dark green, as the Land Fund is, a dark green fund, whose focus and objective is to proceed a sustainable goal. And that's where we stand. And the project has all these co-benefits that you were mentioning, Assunção. So not only it develops and focuses on climate change mitigation adaptation, so it focuses on sequestering and removing carbon from the air, from the atmosphere, but it also has all these positive impacts we were talking a while ago with the local communities, with the landscape in these areas that are abandoned and some of them burned from wildfires. And in Portugal, 97% of our forests are privately owned. So we need these types of instruments to make sure we channel and we redirect financing to these projects that actually have this positive impact in transforming the landscape back to original and native species project. And it has this approach of focusing on native species, and I would like to underline that because it's not sequestering carbon at all costs. It's making it in a way that it's correctly adapted to the different features of the territory, because this is the way of transforming these territories in resilient areas, especially in the context of climate change, and they will have to survive on their own. So the aim is the model of the fund is we are presently fundraising. So once the land is fully constituted, we will be buying land in these areas, afforesting, developing a correct and sustainable management of these areas and of the forest, enhancing all those services that the forest provides to us in all these restored ecosystems.
And actually, if I recall, one of the concerns of the Land Fund was not only to look at the carbon issue, so mitigation through carbon sequestration, but also adaptation, but again with biodiversity, which is something I believe is really starting. So nowadays we talk about the carbon credits, but biodiversity credits are a reality that will come up soon. In your case, you combine both, and it was actually done looking at the Portuguese decree law also, that at least in the version that was into public consultation and commented and discussed, we have two kinds of credits, the carbon credits and the carbon credits plus, which means that, of course, we started based on contracts and private autonomy and all these assurances that the Land Fund provides to whoever wants to buy the credits, and also the participants in the fund, which actually will be remunerated, paid through in specie through the carbon credits, at least a part of these participants. But the idea is also to make this shift to this platform that will be created under this decree law and possibly under the European legislation. So everything was done to make sure that you can shift from purely voluntary and contract-based solution to a voluntary but also regulated-based solution. Is that so?
Definitely, and the biodiversity. We always say that carbon is a bit misleading when we focus. It's misleading to focus this project only on carbon. It's just one of the central outputs, and from a financial standpoint, the financial model, the trigger and the game changer is definitely carbon. We are also counting on more classical agroforestry revenues, not wood in itself, only marginally, but resin, those other byproducts that the forest provides. Land appreciation, because as I said, our aim is to buy these plots of land. But actually, the add-on of the carbon value is very important in the model. But in fact, as you just said, Assunção, biodiversity has always been our focus from the scratch, from the beginning. We are not, of course, still considering from an economic point of view and financial point of view possible future biodiversity credits or resilience credits. We have actually a quite conservative approach to our financial model, and even considering the carbon price, which is still kind of volatile. All the predictions and estimations say that it will increase enormously in the next decade. But we have a very conservative approach. But all these add-ons must or may accrue and may be added on to the model as these methodologies stabilize. And yes, in fact, we have FSC, so Forest Stewardship Council, that is the base of our certification. It's a very strong and well-recognized certification for forest management and also ecosystem services management. And on top of that, we will be having other layers of certification. We are waiting and with high expectations on the Portuguese carbon market regulation, the European one, as you just mentioned, and international recognitions, because the thing that is most important for carbon projects and especially nature-based project like the Land Fund is actually to have a credible, a robust, and a transparent market that allows for carbon credits and the carbon market to be well recognized, because we need it in order to reach neutrality. And so we might as well make sure that they are correctly regulated and more provide confidence for investors to actually invest and put their money where their mouth is and invest in projects like land.
One of the interesting things about land is that it aims to invest in Portugal and Spain. So it's a neighborhood project.
Indeed.
Which is something when we think about nature-based solutions, we always think about Africa, South America, Asia, where we feel that nature is still very at the beginning and we have to protect and recover and so on. But this is really interesting because if we link that to the demand side, which means that in Europe we have right now still under construction enormous puzzle of legislation, and legislation that is really hard, and the ESG framework leads companies from the biggest but also to SMEs and also through the value chain process and so on, to report a lot on their emissions and to report on their strategy to contribute to the 1.5 European goal. And this means that companies will need to, of course, reduce emissions, but at the end, the residual emissions might be compensated, and might be compensated through, namely, the acquisition of carbon credits. These carbon credits, do you feel that it's interesting and more appealing for European-based companies if they find out good solutions, bold solutions in the European area, so right next the corner, where they can feel and see that something is really done also to recover nature after wildfires and so on? Do you feel that is an advantage of the Land Fund? So it's very close to the operation of European companies?
Indeed, so the proximity that this project allows for a more local company is quite evident. As you mentioned, historically, the carbon offset projects started more in other parts in other geographies on the context of the Kyoto Protocol and so on and so forth. But now more and more, and the European regulation points very clearly in that direction, is that more and more we should look at our backyard as well, and restore nature within Europe. We should, of course, protect more as much as we can those forests that still stand elsewhere. But
there's legislation coming on in that part as well.
Of course. But indeed, it's important to look at our backyard and do something and in Portugal we do have lots of challenges as regards wildfires in rural areas. So it's very important to actually address this issue from this positive impact perspective. And indeed, companies must more and more, with all the reporting obligations they have to comply with that you just mentioned, they will have to, as regards specifically carbon offsets, they will have to report transparently which kind of carbon credits they use, where they come from, where are they generated, which kind of project, if it's a technological project or a nature-based solution project. If the project and the carbon credits it generates are duly audited, for example, so the robustness that the European regulation provides to this market is paramount to make this shift that you mentioned. And in that sense, Gland is indeed a front runner because it almost works as a pilot, a proof of concept that can be escalated and replicated elsewhere, and most of all here in Europe, in the southern Europe.
Yes, definitely, and hopefully in the coming future in the ocean areas.
Indeed,
because
it's a challenge.
The afforestation and forestation
Yes.
challenges also in the ocean, but that's another conversation. But it's really interesting to see that, and from the point of view of my observation, I do see a lot of move coming from the demand side and from the supply side. And you are suppliers of carbon credits, and I can observe other things starting and trying to combine and to mix the demand and the supply. And of course, we have a lot of legislation that will put pressure, but a good pressure, I would say, because all of this needs to be clear, robust, bold, and this is very important, giving the right incentives to continue reducing emissions, but at the same time compensating the residual emissions, which I think it's really an important path.
Yes, on that, I forgot to mention a while ago. So this totally fits into, so an investment in the land fund fits into a decarbonization strategy and plan of a company, for example, which also, of course, mostly has to focus on mitigation and reducing emissions. But you have those non-abatable, at least with the science that we know and the technology we have today. And that's where carbon offsets fit as a part of all that strategy. And one thing that I think really makes a difference in investing in land is the fact that the project's lifespan is 15 years, with renewable cycles of 5 years, which coincided with the carbon monitoring and estimation and then evaluation cycles. So 15 years at least, and this provides predictability and feasibility to the offset strategy of a company. And it's also worth mentioning the fact that it's part of that it's that feature that makes it also very innovative, is the fact that whoever invests in land might choose between two different types of units, participation units. So as a corporate, for example, that will actually need to have access to the carbon credits generated. The participants may have access directly in species, as you mentioned, Assunção, to the carbon credits the project generates. And then you have other types of more institutional, more financial investors that aren't so keen or so focused on the carbon credits, but indeed in contributing to their green asset ratio. So within their portfolio, they will have to report on which part of it or how much of it is green, in the sense that it's sustainable, and an investment in the land fund will qualify for that. So depending on the type and the type of investor, we have two different types of participation units, which is very versatile and addresses the specific considerations of the investors.
Definitely, Angela. If we look at the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, but also the CRR specifically for the banks and the financial sector, we'll see a lot of demand for this kind of products, which now have a good solution for Portugal and Spain. But we have still some minutes, and I don't know if you agree we could open to the audience and take some questions if you want. If not, we can continue going deep in the solutions. But we have one question, please.
Maybe replicate the question so that so it's how the land. Sorry, Elise, that I.
Hi. How the land use upcoming legislation could be integrated in an ESG reporting in the year's future? Because we know the legislation is all over, and on ESG reporting we have to see the whole picture. But how land use, specifically in law, gets into the board?
There, if you can just complement what we have right now, still under preparation, but coming to these final details, is this Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is in this period of transposition for the Portuguese legislation and for Europe as a whole. So it's 18 months that started last January. And right now we have the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, which tells us that the companies must be very concrete and very detailed when reporting their carbon footprint and their strategy to eliminate this carbon footprint. So not only their own emissions, but scope 1, 2, and 3. And this is for companies as a whole, but for the financial sector, even with specificities coming from other kind of legislation. But at the end, the goal is pretty much the same. Europe wants to make sure that for the latest, by 2050, we are climate neutral. Portugal wants to be climate neutral, hopefully, by 2045, as the Prime Minister just stressed once again. And this means that the companies do have to contribute in many different ways. There is specific and sectoral legislation on reduction emissions. There are also these areas that come into the regulated carbon market, so which in Europe the ETS, which runs for quite a good number of years, and it's a very good example. But for the rest, and still for those companies as well, there's this reporting pressure that will make sure that the companies really reflect on their own conditions, on their what they're doing, what they're aiming to do, what is the narrative, what is the move that they're going to do in order to be aligned with these objectives. And this is right now under very specific detail. What the Land Fund provides is, it's not all the solutions, but it's a solution that is aligned with these report requirements. But maybe you can.
There's not much more to add after what Susan just mentioned. So I always see it like a puzzle, and the pieces fit together. I think that's the way of looking at this this change of paradigm and this in the context of Europe and the legislation that is aiming for us to comply with the targets.
But land use is a great pillar of E in
Oh,
reporting.
indeed.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Apparently not. No? Well, we have another.
Only to icebreaker the audience, also after the first question, of course. I would like to ask one thing that nowadays are discussing also in Ireland because of the big areas that are buying for big investments to rewild the land, but at the same time they are not protecting the agriculture, the other type of forest, also the small village and the small traditions and so on in the focus of rewilding. But in Portugal, in fact, we have a mosaic in terms of the territory, how we can ensure that this is making sustainable in all levels with communities also.
Thank you, George. So the land funds approach is indeed a mosaic approach, let's say like that. So we see an approach to the landscape and to the territory as complementary. So we will have enough space. We have so much to do in our landscape. It has so many challenges in these areas we want to address. In the inner part of Portugal, less favored, abandoned, burnt areas. So there's so much to do. There's so much areas that have to be interventioned that I honestly don't believe that will be a problem, because we will have space and areas for rewilding or a more conservation approach to forest. We will still have production forests. We'll still have agriculture. Actually, one way of diversifying the risk in this project, of course, we're talking about a long-term project, and a project that involves a certain amount of risk, because we're talking about nature and we're talking about forests. And so one of the ways to actually address the risk and to try to turn the project less risky as possible is diversify the areas where we intervene. And so we have approach of coming into the different areas of the Portuguese territory and from an more efficient and way of management of the forest. We will go, we'll spread out through the territory. And as I mentioned, the social, the local, economic approaches and including the local communities is paramount for our project. And so diversifying also with access to, there will be still space for agriculture. Our focus is not agriculture. Of course, we don't choose, sometimes we don't choose exactly how the different areas and the plots of land that we can buy what they have in there. If they have eucalyptus, then our aim will be to change from eucalyptus and change to native species. But we won't be buying only areas that have no agriculture, no eucalyptus, no whatsoever. The point, and the regulators are very important in that approach, is to actually have a finance that allows us to transition from a more brown perspective to a more green perspective and sustainable. And in that case, you will have to approach territory taking into account the different features and local characteristics, and involving, of course, most of all people, because people, it's a cycle, a negative cycle. These areas are less and less productive. People don't stay there, and from a cohesion perspective of the territory, it also makes sense to have these types of projects such as land.
If I might just add one thing, is that one of the problems with all these rural areas, forestry areas and agriculture and so on, is how to finance projects when the agricultural part or even the forestry part, it's not competitive enough from a market point of view, because the soil is not that good, because the conditions are not perfect, because really when you compare to other areas, you don't have the optimal conditions to have market-proof projects that will go by their own, so they're really sustainable from a financial perspective. What this tool brings us, and what the Land Fund brings us, is solutions that, as they combine with the carbon removal and the voluntary carbon market solutions, we have an extra income for the fund, which allows to look at these abandoned areas, not so productive, not so interesting for other solutions that might really be the good case for the voluntary carbon markets. Why do I say this is a good case? Because one of the requisites that normally the legislation states, Portuguese and European legislation, at least as far as we know it, is this additionality. And additionality looked into perspective, so the nature perspective. So you're adding something, you're removing more than you already remove if you don't do anything, if you just let the land be like that. But also from an economic perspective, that is, this is only feasible, attractive, viable, because there's a voluntary carbon market tool. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to make the market pay for these investments and for these solutions, which makes this something really important and interesting for the abandoned parts, for the less favored areas, for areas where actually you don't see other solutions coming. At least they haven't come in the last decades. So this is an important opportunity to be addressed, and hopefully the legislation will help bringing robustness, bringing credibility, transparency, and so on, which is very important to raise the price of the carbon ton. Yes.
It's exactly that, so we have to make sure that these plots of land integrate this value of theirs, because nowadays a forest is worth more dead after cutting. It's a paradox. Instead of being worth by standing, by existing, and all the services that the ecosystem provides must be remunerated, and it becomes these projects indeed become viable because of that. As I mentioned a while ago, it's this add-on that the carbon revenue brings to the project that makes it feasible and interesting. And all these areas are being abandoned because they are unproductive. They don't work for agriculture. They don't work for forest production, or else they would be already being exploited that way. So that's the challenge. If we don't address this issue, if we do nothing to our territory, no one will do it. So it's this add-on that carbon brings that is a way of turning the management of these areas and of these future forests feasible and doable from a financial perspective. Because, again, land has all these co-benefits. An impact project has these co-benefits. But it's not philanthropic. Of course, it's an investment. It's not a short-term investment. We have to focus more and more on long-term investments. It's a long-term investment. It doesn't provide investors with high revenues. We're not there. That's not this kind of project. There are others in the market, but it's a project that it doesn't allow that much revenue, but it does allow revenue and has all these co-benefits. And even for corporates, from a sustainability and ESG perspective, it ticks the boxes. It ticks all the boxes. It's a comprehensive and very systemic approach to the territory, to our territory, and we like to call it as a flagship project. Because it's in our backyard, our territory, and we have all partnerships. We have great partnerships with the Portuguese government, with the academia, with a technological knowledge. It's the Land Fund's technological consultant, in order to enable technology to address all these issues that we need and the aim that the project has. So. It's a systemic approach.
We're running out of time. I guess we still have time for one last question, if that's the case. Please.
I'm going to stand up. Okay. I think it's a bit hard to hear, but I'm from EDP, and I wanted to congratulate the project. It's very interesting because in our case we have a net zero commitment by 2040, meaning that in terms of carbon credits and offsets, to reach the net zero goal, which is aligned with science and following the SBTi standards, we would only need to be making offsets by that date. But this means that we're talking about nature, and nature takes a long time. And so the regulation and the development of these kind of projects is crucial to be made at this point. So I wanted to raise that point because it's very important that we raise it here as well at COP. So it's a great opportunity to raise, because we really need the standardization of carbon markets, and we need the harmonization of rules so we have a level playing field. Because the investments that we are making today in these kind of projects will be delivering the nature benefits as well as the other benefits that this project is making. But this is essential also for the company. So I'm speaking here on the side of, I would say, the off-taker to really stand on the relevance of this kind of projects.
Thank you, Madalena.
Thank you, Madalena. I just wanted to say that we're always saying that the time is now. Because we are planting trees, we won't be standing in their shadow. That's the motto we normally use. And we must act now because it takes time. And if we do want to have that impact, and we want to, and it's much more than only just carbon, and it's much more, it's all those positive impacts. It's biodiversity, it's renaturing, it's actually managing correctly our landscape, our territory, preventing fires, because the forests that burn the most by far in Portugal are the forests that aren't managed. And because why aren't they managed? Because, as Susan was saying, their owners have no economic incentive to actually manage. It's only a cost for them. They don't take any benefit from these territories. So the fact that these ecosystem services are provided for and have a return, be it carbon credits from carbon sequestration, biodiversity, all these other ecosystem services that the conservation forest that has a challenge in a certain perspective as regards additionality, because it's not that incremental as the baseline, but in fact the protection of these areas that already exist and have to be well managed and correctly managed to enhance and protect and keep the carbon sequestrated and all the co-benefits that it brings to society and to all of us must be protected now. And of course we are aiming to have international investors, but it totally makes sense for us that Portuguese investors, Portuguese companies, the fund is aimed at professional investors and institutional investors. It's not like individual investors are welcome to invest, but only if they fit a whole bunch of different criteria. But it's actually to have this positive impact, and it's to walk the line and do all the roadmap that the fund allows for, this feasibility and predictability during the whole lifespan of the project, to actually provide all those co-benefits. So thank you for your comments.
Angela, I guess our hour has run. I have to thank all of you and to thank Secretary of State of the Climate Action of the Portuguese government who joined us. Just to say that this was really always very interesting to exchange views with Angela Lucas and give some more information about this project, which I really hope to be a pilot project and a front runner of this kind of solutions that we need pretty much to embrace new possibilities to requalify, to recover our territory, our less favored areas, the ones that are most exposed and at risk, at physical risks, namely desertification and fires and so on, and droughts and all that we know. But hopefully, and I have to say this, Angela, hopefully in the coming future you will look at the ocean and find out solutions for ocean afforestation and reforestation. So thank you very much for being with us today here, and for the ones that are watching us in the YouTube also, thank you very much.